So we are back one more time, slightly out of focus. I mean, we are actually in focus, but yeah, that's our title, right? I am a little bit out of breath. Came back from a photo walk just now. I mean, like half an hour ago. Stephen, you also were running back from town or something like this,
I
right?
was at my picture frame as
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Very cool. We can talk about it. You have an exhibition coming up, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, nice. Everyone, again, thank you so much for all the comments and the feedback on the last episode of the podcast. It's great connecting with you all, and yeah, seems like you are enjoying our spontaneous, unplanned conversations here. So yeah, uh, same idea, guys. So what should we talk about today? I mean, who wants to start? We have I have some ideas here, but maybe I don't know. Steven, let's talk about your exhibition coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's the first solo exhibition I've ever had. It's very small. It's not in an art gallery or a museum. It's in a coffee and culture. It's a little a little cafe that has a series of exhibitions, maybe 5 a year or 4 a year. They have a man who is the curator who takes care of that, and it's very small. Actually, Tomasz, you also exhibited there a couple of years ago, I think.
Oh, it was like probably more like 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I know the place, cute cafe, and they organize those exhibitions. So how was it? I remember the difficulty for me back then because it's a really small place, right? And how many pictures are you able to exhibit?
Yeah, he mentioned that that's often a problem. I'm going to mine are relatively large because in the space the viewers cannot get right up to them, most of them. So they have to look at them from maybe
From 50 meters away? No, it's not.
a yard or 2 yards. Now they have to be like a yard or 2 yards away from them. So I made them relatively large. And that means then that I decided, and I wanted to frame them and mat them, so they're relatively large, maybe a half a meter wide or more. So I can only exhibit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 11 pictures, but that's okay. That's okay. And I was at that. I rushed in today to our meeting to our from my framer. I have a woman who makes frames for me, and she had all the frames and the glass and the mats, and so we framed all the pictures today.
You
And
you framed them already now.
well, I helped her. We put them in. I have a certain way I like to mount my pictures on the backboards. So we put them in. She wrapped them, did the finishing touches, and they're in the car now.
Okay.
But the whole experience, like I said, it's my first exhibit, and um, yeah, I'm an absolute novice in this thing. I participated in the Frames group exhibition, as did Scott, I think,
Mhm.
right
Yep.
in Boston. And so I've been preparing. I've been in the darkroom a lot the last weeks and preparing the pictures, making large enlargements, the largest enlargements I've ever made up until now, and then trying to make a decision. The curator of this little gallery, he had an idea of what he wanted. He wanted water pictures, water, but he wanted so kind of foggy, moody, dreamlike water pictures. And I found them too boring. I wanted another kind of water picture. And so I've made them all and made the choice. And then all of a sudden, the other day, I started thinking, oh, are these pictures really worth?
Well, no, we talked about it. They are
There's
absolutely.
what? Yep, yeah, but I'm sure you know the feeling.
Oh yeah.
You have a collection in front of you, and you say, "Oh, is that really worth showing?" Today, when I put them in the frame, and they were matted and behind glass, and I thought, "Okay, okay, some of them are okay." But that was the kind of the revelation to me in this whole experience. Um, when in my life as a conductor, that's been my life. I can stand in front of 120 professional musicians, rehearse with them all week, lead a 3-hour concert, and be in full authority and in full control. And now as a photographer, I get totally uh, what's the word? Incapacitated by my lack of confidence.
But but it's interesting. As coach, also you exhibited not only in group exhibit. You had some solo shows as well, right?
Oh yeah.
So, like both of you, like, and I also did it a couple of times. This choice, and especially when you have, like Stephen, you said 11 images. So I can imagine for whatever series decided to exhibit, you must have more of them. So how difficult was this moment for both of you of the selection? Like, you know, 100 of them maybe in your series, but you can only exhibit 11. Was this a difficult part, Scott? How you remember those?
Well, for me, I've got slightly a different story. And Stephen, I really want to hear about the framing too, because one of the things that haunts me is an old New Yorker cartoon where these parents have sat their child down on the edge of the bed to have the talk, and they look at the kid and they say, we used to have a college fund for you, but we decided to get a picture professionally framed. I mean, the simple cost of it is so prohibitive. I'm worth it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's worth it. And I know a lot of photographers who make their own frames, custom frames, and even down to being, woodworking and stuff. But the last couple of shows I've had, one was a coffee shop show, and I adore coffee shop shows. The whole vibe of the viewers is very different. But at a shop here, we did 20 pictures that they were all 24 by 24, the size of the things you see over my shoulder here. And there were 20 of them. And what we did for the presentation is we bought those magnetic bars for the top and the bottom, very cheap. And then they were printed on a thick photo paper. The cool thing was, I mean, it cost me relatively, nothing to put them up. At the end of the show, they were up for 2 months. At the end of the show, we gave away every print. They'd become a little weather worn, whatever. And people were just, blown over by the fact that they could take, these things off the wall and take them home with them, do whatever. An earlier show than that, I had never heard there was something called magnetic paint in the gallery. So they would put the print up against the wall and just put 4 magnets on the 4 corners. So my last 2 shows had 0 frames whatsoever. Just, good paper and away we go. But there's something really special about the mat, the frame, the permanence. We had another show here in town where a bunch of us who had old exhibits in the basement basically, said, "Hey, what have we got from other shows?" We brought them all up and did a show that way. So, did the presentation, Stephen, did the present the value added of the frame really inspire you?
Yes, it really did. I mean, that's when I said, okay, well, maybe I don't have to be ashamed after all. I mean, it makes a good photograph into a great photograph.
Mhm.
But
That's a topic, by itself. Let's talk about it. This is so interesting. I mean, the moment you put a digital frame around your image, digital one,
Yeah.
don't you have the feeling it's, you know, 20% a better image? I don't know. There is something about this is probably about the focus which we give the image, right? It kind of
yeah, I mean, it
boosts.
sets the match sets it apart. And all of the frames I had made were the same wood, very light colored wood, and so the pictures are isolated, and they become um,
Yeah.
you become more focused when you're looking at
Yeah.
them. They're in a mass.
So somehow they gain importance, yeah, a little bit more importance. Yeah, it's
But yeah, then you find yourself with that annoying, conversation. Okay, do I want a super huge mat with a tiny little picture in the middle? Do I want just a hairline mat? There's this spend
Now-
hours.
But listen, back to the choice, Stephen.
Yeah.
11 out of how many?
Yeah, I of course have a lot of landscape pictures, and like I said, the curator wanted a certain direction, and I felt like it needed to have more variety, and then there were just practical things. There were some pictures that I really loved that when I started enlarging them, I realized that the negatives had mistakes in them, or that prevented me from making the enlargements as large as I wanted. So that one was gone. And another interesting thing that I did in the choice, I invited. Well, you remember I invited you to look at them, Tomasz. I invited a professional photographer friend of mine here in Lucerne. I invited my wife. I invited my son, and I invited the curator of the show to look at them and help me decide which ones. Every one of these 6 people had a different opinion about which were the weak ones and which were the strong ones. That was also another revelation. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
No,
So I decided in the end, okay, I will choose. And so I just chose the pictures that I like the most, that speak to me. And I said, that's just how it's going to have to go.
yeah, I think it's the way to go, actually, right? Like in the end, as you say. And also, I saw, will the pictures be for sale?
Yes, they will be for sale, and I'm hoping that I can at least recoup the cost of the framing.
That's an ambitious plan, right?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, selling but actually, I thought about it before we started discussing it. That actually, maybe in our case, organizing an exhibition in a local place, like like you are doing now, maybe the chance of selling is actually a little bit higher. I don't know what Scott, what's your experience, but I remember when I organized this exhibition exactly 10 years ago. I guess it was. So I live in Lucerne. I mean, just near Lucerne. Then I lived in Lucerne, and I had this project going on in Lucerne Times. It was all pictures of Lucerne, black and white, and I exhibited them in Lucerne. So people resonate, and maybe a chance of selling a few is higher than whereas I go with my Lucerne pictures to Honolulu, right?
Yes. And
I don't know.
I decided to not ask what one would normally expect to have to pay for a piece of art, because I'm a nobody, and I don't have a name as an artist, and uh, I have to give. Of course, you have to give 40% to the gallery, and so I decided to just try to make it affordable for someone is who is attracted to a certain image and thinks, "Oh, that would be nice in my house." Then make it doable for them.
Affordable is also a relative term, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I still you still have time, or you already set the prices? Each of us has some kind of idea about the pricing, right? Compared to what we see, then we try to price our own images. But I think this feeling which you have when it comes to correct pricing or your own, of your images, you should not be going lower than what the gut is actually telling you. I think because not underpricing yourself, not undervaluing. I mean, Scott, what do you think? You sold some pictures.
Yeah, no, I've sold a handful, and my very different experiences per situation. Um, a couple of my images have sold at a local art gallery when they have their annual gala, and it's an auction, which is a fundraiser. Now, that fundraiser is a motivation to pay more than what you might have, paid for in a standard gallery, because you're raising money for a good cause. I've also had pictures, what I thought you go, framing, they printed them on black and white paper under acrylic. Really, really, they didn't sell at all. So it's a real hit and miss based on the phase of the moon and what kind of clouds are in the sky. But this also goes back to what we're talking about last time, and notions of success. For as far as I'm concerned, once the images are up on the gallery wall, they are successful. They are present to the public, and if every single one of them sells, great. That's an extra cheeseburger. If none of them sell, that's an opportunity to display them again. I am really sort of fascinated these days with the notion of printing on that sticky back photo paper, and then just doing kind of street art, going around town and with telephone poles and electric boxes and stuff. So, yes, my work is hanging up on the walls in homes of people that I don't know, but that to me is not where my interest lies, which is also why I'm not spending, a second or third mortgage on frames. The physical things, mind you.
Let me jump here in with the idea I prepared for today, because somehow ties nicely into the entire story of, like, Stephen, in your case, you have photographed landscapes around Lucerne, in the area, in the region, for years, right? So it's kind of like a long-term project of yours, right? I would say, in a way, right? I have something, but first let me just share a screen. I just discovered the photographer. Let me just share the screen here. Um, his name is Steven Di Rado. I shared the link to his website in today's photo snack in the newsletter.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating. I had never heard about Steven Di Rado before. Fascinating work, mainly because he was, I mean, still is working in a few, or actually quite many, long-term, really long-term projects. So, for example, this one, which we are looking at now, is called Dinner Series. What he started doing, I guess it says on the website, was 20 years ago or 40 years ago. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
He started basically taking photos of friends, guests, whoever visiting his home, I guess, but also in other places, mainly his home, for dinners. And he photographs those people with his large format camera, I guess. It's kind of posed, unposed pictures. I mean, they know obviously he's taking a picture with a big camera, but as you see on this one, for example, it's quite a spontaneous capture, right? He has been doing it for years. I realized this was like a revelation for me today, actually. I realized a picture like this, for example, by itself, it's a nice shot, okay, but it's kind of like a snapshot. It's maybe not a groundbreaking image in any way, but when you see it, when you start looking at 280 of those in a series or in a book, I mean, I was amazed with the dedication. And it is not the only project he does like this. I think he's a British photographer. He lives in Worcester. Yeah, look here, Worcester, 1985 to the present. How many years is it? 49, 50 years. Sorry, 40 years, right? Look at this. Just walking with his camera around the town for 40 years.
Yeah. And another example, which some of our viewers may have seen in the New York Times. There was an article about a variety of artists in the New York Times. One of them was a photographer, a woman, and her name escapes me now. A woman who started taking a picture of herself every day when she was like 20, and thought, okay, well, she'll do it for 20 years. until she was 40, and then kept going, and she's probably 60 now. So she has taken one picture a day of herself for 40 years.
Wow.
And on her website, I went on her website to see, and I also thought that the dedication um, that it takes, or just the discipline.
Yeah, it's amazing. But what? Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the dedication and the discipline there are impressive. There, we are all every single one of us, however, is working on a long-term project. I think of the title of one of Joel Meyerowitz's big books. It's called Where I Find Myself. We take the pictures that appeal to us. And in retrospect, we may look back and say, oh my heavens, I've got 810 pictures of Gala apples. I didn't know I was working on a long-term project about apples, but it seems I was. And so, they tend to appear that way. The intentionality is impressive, but I don't think it's the only way to sort of say, I have, out of my own sensibility, been working on a long-term project I didn't know I was working on.
But
Yeah, but that's something different, though.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, we have hanging in our what's his name, Kennedy, I think, who took a picture of his wife and her three sisters every year.
Right, and then in the last one of the sisters is gone?
No, I haven't seen that, but
Okay.
he did that also for 40 years and then continued it for 20. Of course, that was easy. He only had to do it once a year, but he started that and kept with it. And so many of these photographers, like you're talking about, Tomasz, um, who don't just by chance realize at some point that they have a long series, but have determined at some early point, I'm going to do this for the next 10 years.
that's what I was about to ask you, both of you. I mean, do you think majority of those long-term projects, which we then see in the books, and we are so impressed, exactly started as a deliberate idea in the very beginning or not? It's just exactly like Scott, you say, because we see those projects in the books, on the websites after those 40 years. Okay.
Yes.
Stephen, you could also go ahead now and create a section of on your website, called Lake Lucerne. Probably you have, 180. Suddenly, it has become a long-term project. But did you start it consciously 40 years ago? I don't think so, right? That's
I
it.
mean, I thought about Kennedy with his sisters-in-law and his wife. Yeah. Um, I thought probably the first 3 or 4 years, they just kind of every year they got together in the summer on their holidays and said, "Let's take a picture." And the sisters got together in the same order in front of the. And after the third year, he realized, "Oh, I think maybe we've got something going here."
Yeah.
But this moment when you realize, or when you, consciously, not consciously, continue with the project, for me, it's interesting. Me personally, I get quite easily bored, quote unquote bored, not with the photography itself, of course, but I don't know, with the continue. I went out and started photographing, the local coffee shops, let's say, right? I don't feel like I have this kind of patience, going. I mean, first of all, in Lucerne there is no enough coffee shops for 40 years projects. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to do the same one for 40 years.
No, like I'm just asking myself because, well, we all still have some time on this earth, and is this conscious? I mean, Scott, you are running some actually ongoing projects, right?
Yeah, no, I work on series a lot, but the longest one I did was the 6-7 project, which is a year-long project, and I knew that before I began, looking at the town where I live between the hours of 6 and 7 in the morning. And
You started this one consciously with an idea of
yeah, that one, before I took the first shot, I knew what I was going to do.
yeah, exactly.
But I have other series that are subject-based, but not long-term. I'm going to do a series about, coffee cups or whatever. And okay, I don't know when I'm going to be done until I know I'm done. And So they are not time centric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that gives me a little bit of hope because if you think that many of these projects that we see and are jealous of the photographers for having such an idea, that maybe they are just you know I'm losing my English vocabulary. Just for the matter of chance is that they began them, because I'm constantly plagued by the idea when I look at Tomasz's photo snack every day and see these amazing projects and these amazing photographers. I think I've got to have a project. I need to decide on something that's going to carry me for a while.
No, but
Without
like Scott said, actually, you have those projects.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
You take you've primed the pump, then it becomes intentional. I was thinking the other day, yeah, I have 101 pictures of a tree line south of where I live, and I have taken those pictures because on that particular moment that shot was interesting. But now that I have them, I've started thinking, well, wait a minute, do I want to do a long-term study of this one particular tree line? But that's only because I had the initial critical mass to force the question.
I think it's also makes a difference when it comes to how broadly you define a project. Is a pictures or pictures taken around Lake Lucerne? What's the radius? Is it a project? Compared to pictures of the Lake Lucerne water, or pictures of red socks I found on my way to work before 7 a.m. You know, no, man, projects. It's a personal decision, I guess, right? Yeah. Scott, you have anything?
Yeah, it's a complete sea change from what we're talking about now.
Hey,
But one of the things that perpetually interests me is our relationship to other people within the frame of our photographs. And to be inclusive, I'm talking everything from portraits to street photography to landscape to whatever. We talked a little bit last time, about a landscape photographer whose subject is the mountain, and so has absolutely no guilt or whatever about cloning people out of the image in front of them. I know, or I've seen a video of a portrait photographer, and we're talking, somebody who takes portraits of presidents and kings and this kind of stuff, who right before he presses the shutter release will make a loud noise to sort of startle the subject. It's a odd relationship to provoke an emotion. And I'm really kind of weirdly bothered by a lot of street photography and hardware manufacturers who advertise stealth, who advertise nobody will know you are secretly taking their picture, which is the flip side of people who are trying to do street photography but are petrified of talking to other people, who don't want to go up and say, can I take your picture? Or, hey, I just took one. What do you think? So, my relationship with the people within, the frames that I shoot, is pretty fluid. Sometimes, I will go up in advance if I'm doing kind of a street portrait. And, the old cliche works. You begin with a compliment. I'll walk up and say, hey, you got a great look. Do you mind? I'm doing some street photography. Do you mind if I take your picture? 99.9% of the people say sure. 1% say no, and you say okay and go on. But I also don't go up if the moment isn't, if I'm not doing a portrait, if I'm doing more action, candid, whatever, I will not talk to them in advance. But I have it's street photography. Sometimes I'll go up and say, hey, I just got this of you. But do you feel an obligation to the people in your frames to somehow? That's the wrong way to put it. What about the guy who scares his subjects? What about the guy who's takes a picture and then runs away in secrecy? What about, what is your relationship to the people that wind up in your shots?
uh,
So I was just thinking when I look at street photography, because do not take pictures of people except in my studio as a portrait, as a formal portrait. But when I look at street photography, maybe in the 50s and the 60s, 70s, these stealth photographs were okay. That's just what people did. Think of Vivian Maya, think of all the others that followed her at that time. But today, it makes me feel uncomfortable to see those kind of surreptitiously taken photographs.
And
And
yet,
the
Stephen,
ones
if we call it photojournalism, then all the rules change again. And there's a famous picture of a couple on a beach who won the Pulitzer Prize, who are obviously tremendously distraught. Their child is just drowned in the surf. It was taken, it was published, it won the Pulitzer Prize, and I don't think there's a soul on the planet that would take that picture today.
Yeah, what I mean is if I see a street scene, it's a street scene with 100 people or 1,000. Um, that's okay. I don't care how that's taken. Somebody just stands there and takes it. If though there is a homeless person sitting on the sidewalk, when I see that picture, I feel better when I notice that he is a part of the process. That the photographer has spoken to him, maybe engaged with him, maybe given him a bottle of water, maybe talked to him a little bit, and then said, "Can I take a picture?" And he's still on the sidewalk, and he's still homeless, but he is part of the process. That
Not being exploited. Yeah. The Greg Williams, the celebrity photographer, has a whole series where you can see his left arm reaching out, and either fist bumping or shaking or touching his subject. And he did that intentionally. He said, I want there to be an engagement in the image, beyond, so I'm not invisible back there. But I mean, you even bring up, when you are in the portrait studio, you're still an art director. You're saying turn, stand, shape. Um, do we Are we art directors no matter what? I think the answer might be obviously yes. But to what extent are we willing to deny the fact that we're creating that?
Yeah, I think in a portrait studio, of course, exactly like Stephen said, this is by definition immediately, the subject is becoming the part of the process. I mean, they wanted to enter your studio and so on. It reminded me immediately about about Phil Sharp, the portrait photographer from the UK. We had him in the magazine also on the event, on the Frame Circle event, and he shared this story where I remember asking him, yeah, so how do you work with your clients? What's the process in the studio? And he said usually his sessions take somewhere between 3 and 4 hours for a couple of portraits, in the end, and 50% of this time, or three of those 4 hours, is sitting down having a coffee, where people start sharing the most intimate stories from their lives and crying in his studio and opening up completely, and that's when he starts taking a few pictures. So this is one side of the spectrum, right? This is such trust in this room happening, people open up and everything. Speaking of streets, Scott, you also have to remember we live in, for example, me and us now, we live in different realities, right? I think I shared this story with both of you already, but I will share it now with all of you watching. I shoot a lot on the streets, yeah, it's 100% of my shooting is in public, on the streets, there are people around. And it's interesting for me also a question, if the reality here in Switzerland, where I live, of how people react to a camera, did it shape me as a photographer? I'm sure it did, because today I don't feel comfortable pointing the camera at people, on the streets. But why? I mean, I still try it occasionally. This week, today is Wednesday, right? This week, within the last 3 days, I had two absolutely, terrifying, or what, examples of what does it mean to be a street photographer in Switzerland. The one was, I saw a beautiful scene, a huge church, the Jesuit church here in Lucerne. There was a little temporary building in front of it. In front of the building there was a bench, and on the bench there was a lady with a cup of coffee and reading newspaper. Cool scene, you know, all these proportions and everything. So I try to take a picture. I raise the camera. I frame it. I am around maybe 40 meters away from the woman. The moment I raise up the camera, she stands up, walks up to the left, you know, to make sure she's not in the frame. I kind of fake it and continue shooting like I'm interested mostly in the church. Finish with the shot, start walking. She starts walking back and sits on the bench. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious why she, you know, and she was observing me all the time, right? But just judge.
Tomasz, what was she objecting, or in her mind was she being polite, saying, "Oh, I need to get out of the way. He's taking a picture."
Now, you asked me before. I think she was objecting.
Yeah, either way, here in Switzerland, it's not 99% would say yes, maybe 80% would say yes, and 20% would say no, I don't want my picture taken. And when it gets to 2 out of 10 who refuse, then it gets harder and harder to approach people.
And you know, so the next time I'm in this situation, of course, my fear levels, you know, or my hesitation levels just are so high that I basically give up and I try to start taking different pictures. So that's interesting how this kind of reality shaped me over all those years of living here, you know, today into who I am as a photographer. Yesterday, I had even worse example. I was not even, you know, interested in a person. There was a cool old kind of oldish building, I mean residential building with some kind of oldish, cool looking, you know, retro looking garden in front of it with some bushes, with some plants. It was just a cool scene. So I wanted to photograph it. The moment I raised the camera, the person appears from behind those bushes, from behind those plants, and asks me, is there a problem? From behind, from the apartment behind all of that. She was not even in the picture. People are also very aware here of youth pointing a camera at their private property. I don't know how it is in the US. You know, not only at themselves, at the property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my experience has been in France, in Paris, often that of course, I was taking pictures once in the famous cemetery, Père Lachaise cemetery, and then another time I was taking pictures at the the National Library, the big, huge Mitterrand modern plaza there with the National Library of France. And at both places, I was approached in the cemetery. I was approached by one of the directors of the cemetery who told me I could not take pictures. And a little bit later, I was taking a picture of something innocuous, and I was approached by a good citizen who was just visiting the cemetery, who told me, "You know, you cannot take pictures." And then at the plaza of the National Library, the same thing, approached by a guard saying, "Why are you taking pictures?" And so that really puts a
It does, and I've heard silly things out there, you know, like the giveaway is a tripod. You know, if all you've got is your cell phone, nobody cares. If you've got a little point and shoot, but if you know suddenly, you know, tripods are dangerous. They are, you know, inflicting untold harm.
Steven, by the way, speaking of the long-term projects for another episode, you have a cemeteries long-term or ongoing project.
yes,
We have already
was-
3 of them in your case. So
Yeah,
no,
that's-
no more talk about no projects. Yeah, we are waiting for the book. Like,
I got you.
But I'm still curious, you know, and this is getting at it because it's not only street photography. You know, I think any kind, if you're doing landscapes, are people part of it? Are you know, do you wait for the background to clear before you shoot? Do you know, what is your relationship to the other humans in your frame? Internally, yes. Yeah.
I let them be. And in my portrait photography in the studio, you know, I once was talking to a fellow photographer who does a lot of portrait photography in Mexico and here in Switzerland, and I was saying, you know, I'm always trying to get the soul of the person in their eyes, or try to get them to a moment where they open up and show themselves. And he said, that's not possible. The people will always show you what they want to be seen. So just, and I think, who was it that said the same thing? Either Avedon or Helmut
Newton.
Newton, that photography is not of portraits, is of people, is not getting their soul. It's just taking a picture of their face.
Yeah.
And what comes across is what comes across, which is absolutely fascinating because we love faces as humans. But I don't know.
I had a really interesting experience this last weekend. I went to an event down in Minneapolis, put on by Fujifilm, and as part of the event, they had professional models at several stations around the conference center who were modeling. Now, can you imagine being a model and suddenly you've got 200 amateur photographers all with cameras, trying? And I have never, not once in my life, worked with a professional model. My God, it was great because they knew what to do. They knew how to pose, how to emote. Could have been complete fiction. I have no idea who they are in their heart and soul. But their relationship to the camera was intentional. It was well informed. It was built on experience. And that sort of prompted me to start thinking, well, okay, they know exactly what they're doing in terms of me. How often do I not know exactly what I'm doing in terms of whoever's on the other side of the lens?
Those of you watching, let us know. Yeah, do you include people in your shots? What kind of photography? Where do you live? How does it affect this whole dynamics? It would be interesting also to know how you approach it. And yeah, gentlemen, I think today we're keeping it a bit tighter. We're at almost 45 minutes. What's up the rest of the week for you? Any photographic plans, events?
Yeah, my wife and I are probably going to take about a week and travel down in southern France and northern Italy, where it might be a little warmer than it is here in Switzerland. So I'm trying to decide which cameras to take.
One camera, yeah? One camera.
One camera.
Yeah, just one. Smaller is great. No, I've got a couple trips coming up, but more about that later.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this another episode. Yeah, we'll talk to you later. Keep shooting. Share in the comments. The main topic today was the
Please,
people,
yeah.
the people in your images. Let us know. Yeah.
And framing. No, and my God, Stephen, I want, please post a picture of one of your pictures in the frame. I would love to see
I
it.
will do that. Yes.
Yeah. Let's do it. Okay. Thanks so much, Steve and Scott. Yeah. We talk
Yeah.
2 weeks again. Okay. See you all. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.